It was the kind of night when the city felt full of people, yet no one stopped for a crying child. Rain slammed against the pavement in sharp bursts. Streetlights flickered through sheets of water. Elizabeth Hayes held her baby close under a thin jacket that was already soaked through. Her sneakers slipped slightly with every step. She had just finished a double shift at a diner off Route 9. Her paycheck would not come until Friday. Her baby's fever had risen past 102 degrees an hour ago. She checked again with trembling fingers. Still burning. Still too warm. Just a little farther, she whispered, though she was not sure if she meant the walk or the struggle. Cars passed by without slowing. Headlights cut through the rain, but never paused. A bus roared past and sprayed cold water across her jeans. She did not react. She kept moving. The clinic was 6 blocks away. It might as well have been 6 miles. Her arms ached from holding her child for over 20 minutes. The baby's soft cries had turned into weak whimpers. That silence scared her more than anything. "Stay with me," she murmured, pressing her cheek against the small, damp forehead. A man under an awning glanced at her and looked away. A couple hurried past with umbrellas and did not break stride. The world kept going. It always did. Elizabeth stepped onto a darker stretch of sidewalk where the streetlight had gone out. Water pooled near the curb. She could not see how deep it was. Her foot came down at the wrong angle. For a second, everything felt weightless. Then the ground met her hard and cold. The impact knocked the breath from her chest. She twisted instinctively to shield her baby. Her elbow scraped against the concrete. Pain flashed, but she ignored it. "It's okay," she gasped, though her voice shook. The baby let out a faint cry. Then nothing. The rain kept falling like nothing had happened. Elizabeth pushed herself up halfway, panic rising fast. Hey, sweetheart." No response. Her heart pounded in her ears. For a moment, the city noise faded into a distant hum. She looked around. No one stopped. No one noticed. Then headlights slowed. Not rushed. Not uncertain. Intentional. A sleek black sedan pulled to the curb beside her. The engine quieted, but did not shut off. The driver's door opened immediately. Daniel Brooks stepped out into the rain without hesitation. His coat darkened within seconds, but he did not seem to notice. His eyes moved quickly from Elizabeth to the child in her arms. He knelt beside her, steady and calm. "I'm here," he said, his voice low but clear. Elizabeth flinched slightly. Instinct told her to pull back. Experience told her help always came with a cost. "Please," she said, shaking her head. "I'm fine." Daniel did not argue. He gently removed his coat and wrapped it around the baby. His movements were careful, respectful. "May I check?" he asked. She hesitated for 1 second. Then she nodded. He placed 2 fingers lightly near the baby's neck. His expression did not change, but his focus sharpened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Dr. Harris," he said the moment the call connected. "I need you ready. Pediatric case. High fever. Possible shock." Elizabeth blinked in confusion. The rain kept falling, but something had shifted. Not the storm. The moment. The call ended in less than 5 seconds. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at Elizabeth again. Rain traced down his face, but his voice stayed steady. "We need to move now." Elizabeth tightened her hold on her baby. Fear rose again, sharp and familiar. "I cannot pay for anything," she said quickly. "I do not have insurance right now." Daniel shook his head once. "That is not what matters." His tone carried quiet certainty, not pressure. Elizabeth hesitated. The city around them felt colder than the rain itself. The baby's head rested too still against her arm. That decided it. She nodded. Daniel stood and opened the rear door of the car. Warm air spilled out into the night. "Go ahead," he said, stepping back to give her space. She climbed in carefully, her wet clothes clinging to her skin. The leather seat felt too clean for someone like her. Daniel circled to the driver's side and got in. The door shut with a soft, solid sound that blocked out the storm. For the first time in hours, there was silence. The engine purred as the car pulled away from the curb. Daniel drove with controlled speed. Not reckless, not slow, purposeful. "What is your baby's name?" he asked. "Lily," Elizabeth answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "She is 6 months old." Daniel glanced at the rearview mirror. "Lily," he repeated, as if grounding the moment. Elizabeth adjusted the coat wrapped around her daughter. It was heavy and warm. It smelled faintly of cedar and something clean. Lily's breathing was shallow but steady. Elizabeth watched every rise and fall. Each second felt stretched thin. You did the right thing by keeping her close, Daniel said. Body heat helps. Elizabeth swallowed. I almost stayed home, she admitted. I thought the fever would pass. Daniel did not respond right away. The city lights blurred past the windows. You came out into the rain, he said finally. That means you did not give up. The words settled somewhere deep, though she did not know why. They turned onto a quieter street lined with tall buildings. A glass entrance came into view, bright against the dark sky. Daniel pressed a button on the dashboard. We are 2 minutes out, he said. Prepare the pediatric unit. A calm voice answered through the speaker. Ready and waiting, sir. Elizabeth looked up sharply. Sir. The word echoed in her mind. She studied his reflection in the mirror. His expression remained focused, not proud. The car slowed as they approached the entrance. 2 staff members were already standing outside, with a covered wheelchair and blankets. The door slid open before the car fully stopped. Daniel stepped out first and opened her door. You are safe here, he said quietly. No grand gesture. No expectation. Just a simple statement. Elizabeth stepped out, holding Lily close. The staff moved with practiced care, guiding her inside. Warm light replaced the cold night. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something softer, almost comforting. As they entered, a nurse looked at Daniel with immediate recognition. We have the doctor on standby, she said. Elizabeth's grip tightened slightly. She did not understand who he was yet. But she understood one thing. This was not luck. This was something else entirely. The hallway lights felt too bright after the storm. Elizabeth blinked as nurses guided her forward with calm urgency. A pediatric doctor stepped in within seconds. His name badge read Dr. Harris. His voice was steady and warm. Let me take a look at her. Elizabeth hesitated before releasing Lily into his care. Her arms felt empty the moment the weight left them. The doctor placed Lily on a small bed and began his examination with quick, practiced movements. A nurse wrapped a soft blanket around the baby while another checked her temperature again. 103.1, the nurse said quietly. Elizabeth's breath caught. Dr. Harris nodded once and continued. He listened to Lily's chest. He checked her eyes. He spoke in short, clear instructions. Warm fluids ready. Prepare pediatric fever protocol. Keep her close to normal body temperature. The room moved around Elizabeth, but she stayed frozen near the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched every motion. Daniel stood a few feet behind her. Silent. Present. Not interfering. She is responding, the doctor said after a moment. That is a good sign. Elizabeth let out a breath she did not realize she was holding. It came out shaky and uneven. Will she be okay? She asked. Her voice felt smaller than she intended. Dr. Harris looked at her directly. We are treating this early. That makes a difference. He did not promise anything, but he did not sound worried. That alone gave her something to hold on to. A nurse gently guided Elizabeth to sit in a nearby chair. You need to rest for a minute, she said softly. Elizabeth shook her head. I am fine. But her body disagreed. The moment she sat down, exhaustion settled into her bones. Her clothes were still damp. Her hair clung to her face. Daniel stepped closer but kept his distance. You have been carrying her a long way, he said. It shows. Elizabeth looked up at him for the first time since they arrived. The bright lights revealed details she had missed before. His watch was simple but precise. His shirt was tailored but understated. Nothing about him felt loud. Everything felt intentional. Why are you helping us? She asked. The question came out before she could stop it. Daniel paused for a brief second. Not surprised. Not offended. Because I was there, he said. And you needed someone to stop. Elizabeth studied his face. There was no hesitation in his answer. No hidden meaning she could detect. Just truth, plain and steady. Across the room, Lily let out a small cry. It was stronger than before. Elizabeth stood up immediately. The nurse smiled gently. That is good, she said. She is fighting. Dr. Harris adjusted the blanket and nodded in approval. Her body is responding to treatment. Elizabeth moved. Closer, her steps slow but determined. She reached out and touched Lily's tiny hand. Warm. Still too warm. But alive with movement again. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had no room for breaking down. Not yet. Behind her, the hospital staff moved with quiet respect whenever they passed Daniel. Subtle nods. Quick acknowledgments. Elizabeth noticed it now. Not loud. Not announced. But undeniable. She turned slightly toward him again. Something shifted in her chest. Not trust yet, but something close to it. For the first time that night, the fear loosened its grip just enough for Hope to take a small breath. The room settled into a quieter rhythm as the initial urgency passed. Machines hummed softly in the background. The rain outside faded into a distant whisper against the windows. Elizabeth stood beside the bed, her fingers resting lightly against Lily's blanket. She counted each breath without realizing it. 1, 2, 3. Each rise of the tiny chest felt like a fragile promise. Dr. Harris adjusted the monitor and gave a small nod. Her temperature is coming down slowly, he said. That is exactly what we want. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a brief second. Relief did not come all at once. It arrived in small, careful pieces. A nurse handed her a dry towel. You should warm up, she said gently. Elizabeth hesitated before taking it. The fabric felt soft against her cold hands. She pressed it against her arms, then her face. It carried a faint scent of clean linen. Simple, comforting. Daniel remained near the doorway. He had not checked his phone. He had not stepped away. He simply watched, as if nothing outside this room mattered more. Elizabeth noticed again how the staff moved around him. Respectful, attentive. A quiet awareness followed him without words. She turned toward him fully this time. You knew the doctor, she said. It was not really a question. Daniel met her gaze. I work with this hospital, he replied. The answer was simple. It explained something, but not everything. Elizabeth studied him for another moment. There was no arrogance in his posture. No expectation of gratitude. That unsettled her more than anything else. Most people would not stop, she said. Her voice carried a tired honesty. Daniel nodded once. Most people think someone else will. The words lingered between them. Elizabeth looked down. At Lily again. The baby shifted slightly under the blanket. A soft sound escaped her lips. Not a cry, just a small, sleepy murmur. Elizabeth's shoulders lowered a fraction. She likes warm blankets, Elizabeth said quietly. She always sleeps better when she feels held. Daniel glanced at the bed. Then she chose a strong person to hold her, he said. Elizabeth almost smiled, but it faded before it fully formed. I do not feel strong, she admitted. Daniel stepped a little closer, still leaving space between them. Strength is not about how you feel, he said. It is about what you do when it is hard. Elizabeth absorbed that in silence. No one had said something like that to her in a long time. Across the room, Dr. Harris finished writing notes and turned back toward them. We will keep her under observation for a few hours, he said. But she is stabilizing. The word stabilizing felt like a lifeline. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. Can I stay with her? She asked. The doctor gave a reassuring nod. Of course. A nurse brought a chair closer to the bed. Elizabeth sat down and leaned forward slightly, careful not to disturb Lily. Her hand found the tiny fingers again. Warm now. Still fragile, but no longer distant. Daniel watched for a moment longer. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something on the small table beside her. A simple business card. No explanation. No pressure. In case you need anything, he said. Elizabeth glanced at the card but did not pick it up yet. Her focus returned to Lily. The room felt different now. Not safe yet, but no longer hopeless. And for the first time that night, Elizabeth allowed herself to believe that maybe this moment was not the end of something. Maybe it was the beginning. The hours passed quietly, measured not by clocks, but by small changes in Lily's breathing. The steady rise and fall became more regular. The warmth of her skin softened into something closer to normal. Elizabeth remained in the chair, her posture slightly bent forward as if she could shield her child from anything that might return. A nurse checked the monitor and offered a gentle smile. She is doing much better, she said. Elizabeth nodded, but she did not trust words yet. She trusted what she could see. She trusted the small movements of Lily's fingers. She trusted the faint sounds that now came and went like whispers instead of silence. Daniel had not left. He stood by the window for a while, then moved closer again, always keeping a respectful distance. The storm outside had eased into a light drizzle. The city lights reflected on wet streets like scattered glass. Elizabeth finally reached for the business card on the table. Her fingers traced the edge before she turned it over. The name was simple. Daniel Brooks. No title. No company name in bold letters. Just a number and an address printed cleanly. It did not match the way people looked at him. This is all it says, she murmured. Daniel glanced at the card briefly. It is enough, he replied. Elizabeth looked at him again. Most people would add more, she said. Titles, positions, things that make them look important. Daniel's expression remained calm. If I need to explain who I am, then it does not matter. Elizabeth held the card a little tighter. That answer stayed with her longer than she expected. Across the room, Dr. Harris returned with a chart in his hand. Her temperature is down to 99.8, he said. That is a strong improvement. Elizabeth's shoulders lowered as if a weight had been slowly lifted piece by piece. Thank you, she said, her voice softer now. The doctor nodded. You did the hard part by bringing her in when you did. Elizabeth shook her head slightly. I almost did not, she admitted. Dr. Harris gave her a knowing look. But you did, he said. That is what matters. The room grew still again. Not tense, not rushed, just steady. Lily stirred and opened her eyes for a brief second. They were still heavy with sleep, but aware. Elizabeth leaned closer immediately. Hey, sweetheart, she whispered. Lily made a small sound, then settled again, her tiny hand curling around Elizabeth's finger. That simple gesture felt stronger than any reassurance. Daniel watched the moment without speaking. Something in his expression shifted, almost too subtle to notice. Not pity, not distance, something quieter. Understanding, perhaps. Elizabeth noticed it anyway. You have done this before, she said, not looking away from Lily. Daniel paused before answering. I have seen what happens when no one shows up, he said. The words carried weight, but he did not explain further. Elizabeth did. Not ask. Some things did not need to be pulled apart. A nurse dimmed the lights slightly, allowing the room to settle into a softer glow. The machines continued their quiet rhythm. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Elizabeth leaned back just enough to breathe without tension. Her eyes drifted toward the window, then back to her child. For the first time since the fall, her body began to believe that they were safe. Not completely, not forever, but for this moment, it was enough. And sometimes, enough was everything. Morning arrived slowly, not with sunlight, but with a quiet shift in the air. The hospital room felt softer, as if the tension from the night had finally loosened its grip. Elizabeth had not slept, but her eyes no longer carried the same panic. They carried something steadier. Lily rested peacefully now, her small chest rising in a calm rhythm. The monitor displayed numbers that no longer frightened Elizabeth. Each reading felt like a quiet reassurance instead of a warning. A nurse entered with a gentle knock and checked the chart at the foot of the bed. She held her temperature through the night, she said. That is a very good sign. Elizabeth nodded, her hand still wrapped around Lily's tiny fingers. Thank you, she said, her voice low but clear. The nurse smiled and adjusted the blanket slightly before stepping out. Daniel stood near the window again. The sky outside had turned pale gray, the kind of early morning that felt still and undecided. He had removed his jacket and draped it over a chair, but his presence remained just as composed as before. Elizabeth glanced at him. You stayed, she said. It was not disbelief. It was something quieter. Daniel looked back at her. I said you were not alone tonight, he replied. I do not walk away from that. The words settled gently, without weight or demand. Elizabeth looked down at Lily again. People say things like that all the time, she said. They do not always mean it. Daniel gave a small nod. That is true, he said. But sometimes someone does. There was no need for more explanation. The silence between them felt different now. Not uncertain, not guarded, just present. Dr. Harris returned shortly after, holding a tablet. She is responding exactly how we hoped, he said. If this continues, she can go home later. Today. Elizabeth's breath caught for a moment. Home, she repeated softly, as if testing the word. The doctor smiled. Yes, with instructions, of course. But she is past the critical point. Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly. Relief came this time without hesitation. It filled her chest and stayed there. Thank you, she said again, though the words felt too small for what she meant. Dr. Harris nodded toward Daniel. You got her here in time, he added. Elizabeth followed his glance. She looked at Daniel, really looked this time, as if seeing him fully for the first time. I did not even know your name until a few hours ago, she said. Daniel's expression softened slightly. And now you do, he replied. Elizabeth reached for the business card again. It no longer felt like a stranger's offer. It felt like something real. Daniel Brooks, she said quietly. I will remember that. Lily stirred and let out a small, content sound. Her eyes opened briefly, clearer now, more aware. Elizabeth leaned closer immediately. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. Lily's tiny hand moved again, finding Elizabeth's finger with more strength this time. That simple grip said everything words could not. Daniel watched the moment in silence. There was no need to interrupt something that complete. Outside, the clouds began to break just enough for a hint of light to pass through. It was not bright, not dramatic, but it was there. And sometimes, that was all it took to change how a day began. The discharge papers arrived just after mid-morning. The nurse placed them gently on the small table beside Elizabeth, along with a bottle of prescribed medication and a printed sheet of instructions. Keep her hydrated. Monitor her temperature every 4 hours. If it rises above 101 again, come back immediately, she said. Elizabeth listened carefully, nodding after each point. She repeated the instructions under her breath as if memorizing something fragile. Lily rested quietly in her arms now, her cheeks no longer flushed, her breathing steady and soft. The difference from the night before felt almost unreal. Daniel stood near the door, giving space as always. He had picked up his jacket but had not put it on yet. It remained folded over his arm, slightly creased from where it had wrapped around Lily earlier. Elizabeth noticed that detail. She noticed more things now. "I will not forget what you did," she said, adjusting the blanket around her baby. Daniel met her eyes briefly. "You do not need to carry that," he replied. "Just take care of her." Elizabeth hesitated. "Still," she added, her voice steady, "it matters." Daniel gave a small nod, accepting the words without adding weight to them. A nurse returned with a final check on Lily's vitals and smiled. "You are both ready to go," she said. Elizabeth stood slowly, careful with every movement. Her body still felt tired, but it no longer felt overwhelmed. She placed Lily securely against her chest and followed the nurse toward the exit. Daniel walked a few steps behind, not leading, not directing, simply present. The hallway looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more human. Staff members passed by with quiet greetings, some offering polite nods toward Daniel. Elizabeth caught those glances again. She could not ignore them anymore. As they reached the main entrance, sunlight filtered through the glass doors. The pavement outside was still wet, but the sky had cleared into a pale blue. The world had moved forward, as it always did, but it felt slightly changed. Elizabeth paused just before stepping out. She turned to Daniel. "I do not know how to repay you," she said. There was no embarrassment in her voice now, only honesty. Daniel considered the question for a brief moment. "You do not repay it," he said. "You pass it on when someone else needs it." Elizabeth absorbed that quietly. It felt simple. It felt possible. She nodded once. "I can do that," she said. Lily shifted slightly, her tiny hand pressing gently against Elizabeth's chest. The movement was small, but it grounded everything. Elizabeth stepped outside into the fresh air. It smelled different after the rain. Cleaner. Lighter. Daniel followed her out, but stopped a few feet away. "Do you have a way home?" he asked. Elizabeth hesitated for a second. "I was going to take the bus," she admitted. Daniel glanced toward the street, then back at her. "Let me drive you," he said. It was not an offer wrapped in pressure. It was a continuation of what had already begun. Elizabeth looked down at Lily, then back at him. This time, the hesitation was shorter. "Okay," she said. Daniel moved toward the waiting car and opened the door. Elizabeth stepped in, holding Lily close. The seat felt familiar now, not foreign. As the door closed, she glanced at him once more. The night had started with fear and distance. Now it carried something quieter. Not dependence, not obligation. Something closer to trust, still new, but real enough to hold. The car moved smoothly through the late morning traffic. Sunlight filtered through the windshield in soft patterns that shifted with every turn. Elizabeth sat in the back seat, holding Lily close, her posture more relaxed than it had been all night. The city outside looked ordinary again. People walked along sidewalks. Stores opened their doors. Life continued without noticing how close she had come to losing everything. Daniel drove in silence, his focus steady on the road ahead. He did not fill the space with unnecessary words. That quiet felt different now. It felt respectful instead of distant. "You can turn left up ahead," Elizabeth said gently. "It is about 2 blocks after that." Daniel nodded once and followed her directions without question. The buildings gradually changed. Tall glass structures gave way to older apartments with worn brick and narrow staircases. The streets felt tighter here, more crowded, more real. Elizabeth glanced out the window and then down at Lily. "We live on the third floor," she added. "The elevator has been broken for weeks." There was no complaint in her tone, just fact. Daniel slowed the car as they approached the building. The paint on the entrance door had faded. A small flicker in the hallway light was visible even from outside. He parked along the curb and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The quiet settled again, softer this time. Elizabeth looked at him through the reflection in the window. "This is my stop," she said, almost with a hint of uncertainty. Daniel turned slightly in his seat. "Do you want help carrying her upstairs?" he asked. The offer came naturally, without hesitation. Elizabeth paused, not because she doubted him, because she was not used to saying yes. She looked down at Lily, then back at him. "Okay," she said quietly. Daniel stepped out and walked around to open her door. The air outside carried the warmth of the late morning sun. It felt like a different world from the storm the night before. Elizabeth adjusted the blanket around Lily and carefully stepped onto the sidewalk. Daniel closed the car door behind her and glanced up at the building. "Third floor," he repeated. Elizabeth nodded. They entered the narrow hallway together. The stairwell smelled faintly of old paint and something familiar, like lived-in spaces that held many stories. Daniel followed a step behind as Elizabeth began to climb. Each step felt easier than she expected, not because she was less tired, but because she was not alone on the stairs. Halfway up, Lily stirred again. A soft sound escaped her lips, then settled into quiet breathing. Elizabeth paused for a moment, checking her gently. "She is stronger already," Daniel said from behind her. Elizabeth smiled faintly this time. It stayed. "She is," she replied. They reached the third floor. Elizabeth walked down the short hallway and stopped at a door with a slightly worn number. She shifted Lily in her arms and reached for her keys. For a second, her hands hesitated. Not from exhaustion, from something else. She opened the door slowly. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. Sunlight filtered through a thin curtain, casting a soft glow across the room. Daniel remained near the entrance, not stepping in without invitation. Elizabeth turned back to him. "This is home," she said. The words carried a quiet pride. Daniel nodded once. "It is enough," he replied. Elizabeth looked at him for a moment longer. The distance between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a space that could be crossed, if needed. She adjusted Lily again and stepped inside. This time, when she looked back, it was not with fear or hesitation. It was with something new, something that had started in the rain and followed her all the way home. The door closed softly behind her, and for a moment, Elizabeth just stood there. The quiet inside her apartment felt different from the quiet in the hospital. This one was familiar. This one held memories, both heavy and warm. She walked slowly toward the small couch and carefully laid Lily down on a folded blanket. The baby shifted slightly, then settled into a calm sleep. Elizabeth watched her for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if making sure this piece was real. Daniel remained near the doorway, his presence respectful, never crossing into the space without permission. He glanced around briefly, taking in the small details. A neatly folded pile of baby clothes sat on a chair. A single mug rested on the kitchen counter. Everything was simple, but nothing was neglected. "You have made this place work," he said quietly. Elizabeth looked up at him. "It is not much," she replied. Daniel shook his head once. "It is more than enough for her," he said. Elizabeth followed his gaze back to Lily. That answer landed differently than she expected. Not as comfort, but as recognition. She walked over to the small kitchen and filled a glass with water. Her hands no longer trembled. She took a slow sip, then another. Her body was finally catching up with everything that had happened. "You can come in," she said after a moment, turning slightly toward him. Daniel stepped inside, but only a few steps. He did not sit. He did not make himself at home. He simply stood where he was, present but careful. "Thank you," Elizabeth added. The words felt fuller now, not rushed or uncertain. Daniel gave a small nod. "You are doing the hard part," he replied. Elizabeth leaned lightly against the counter. "I did not think I could get through last night," she admitted. Daniel met her eyes. "But you did," he said. The simplicity of that statement held more weight than anything else. Elizabeth glanced around her apartment again. The same walls, the same worn furniture. Yet everything felt slightly different. as if the space had expanded in a way she could not explain. Lily let out a soft sound from the couch. Elizabeth moved to her immediately, adjusting the blanket with gentle hands. The baby's breathing remained steady. Her small fingers curled loosely, no longer searching. "She is really okay," Elizabeth whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Daniel watched from a distance. "She is," he said. Elizabeth turned back toward him. There was a pause. Not awkward, not forced, just a moment where something unspoken existed between them. "Will I see you again?" she asked. The question came quietly, almost as if she had not planned to say it. Daniel did not answer right away. He considered it, not as a promise, but as a possibility. "That depends," he said. Elizabeth tilted her head slightly. "On what?" Daniel's expression softened just enough to be noticed. "On whether you ever need someone to stop again," he replied. The words were simple, but they carried the same quiet certainty from the night before. Elizabeth held his gaze for a second longer. Then she nodded, not because she fully understood, but because something in her trusted it. Daniel stepped back toward the door. He paused briefly, then opened it. Sunlight from the hallway spilled into the room for a moment before he stepped out. The door closed gently behind him. Elizabeth stood still for a second. Then she turned back to Lily. The apartment was quiet again, but it was no longer the same kind of quiet she had known before. The apartment felt still after the door closed, but not empty. Elizabeth moved quietly, as if the moment required care. She adjusted the curtains slightly to let more light in. Sunlight stretched across the floor in soft lines, touching the edge of the couch where Lily slept. The baby shifted and let out a small, content sound. Elizabeth paused and watched, her chest rising with a slow breath. The tension from the night had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It no longer pressed down on her. It sat beside her, manageable, almost understood. She walked to the small table and picked up the bottle of medicine the hospital had given her. The label was clear. The instructions were simple. She read them again anyway, not because she forgot, but because she wanted to be certain. Everything mattered now. Every detail felt important. She placed the bottle carefully beside the couch within reach. Then she glanced at the business card resting next to it. Daniel Brooks. The name looked the same, but it carried more meaning now. It was no longer just ink on paper. It was a reminder of a moment when everything could have gone differently. Elizabeth picked it up and turned it between her fingers. She did not call. Not yet. She simply held it for a second longer before setting it back down. Across the room, the clock on the wall ticked steadily. Time moved forward like nothing had happened. That felt strange. It felt almost unfair. Yet it also felt like a quiet gift. Lily stirred again, her eyes opening slowly this time. Clearer, more aware. Elizabeth moved immediately, her steps soft but quick. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling beside the couch. Lily blinked and made a small sound, her tiny hand reaching out instinctively. Elizabeth placed her finger in that small grasp. The warmth was steady now, not burning, not fragile, just warm. "You are okay," Elizabeth said softly. The words felt real this time. Not hopeful, not desperate. Real. Lily responded with a faint movement, then settled again, her eyes half closing. Elizabeth smiled, a quiet expression that stayed longer than before. She leaned back slightly and sat on the floor beside the couch. Not because she had to, because she wanted to stay close. The room remained simple. The same walls, the same worn furniture. But something had shifted inside it. The space no longer felt like something she had to endure. It felt like something she could build from. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter. Elizabeth stood and walked over, glancing at the screen. A message from her manager at the diner. She had missed her shift. She read the message slowly, then placed the phone down without replying. Not yet. For the first time, something else came first. She turned back toward Lily and the small living space that held everything she had. The sunlight had grown stronger now, filling more of the room. It touched the business card again, making the white surface stand out against the worn table. Elizabeth looked at it one more time. Then she looked at her daughter. The choice was quiet, but clear. She picked up the card and placed it in a small drawer beside the couch. Not hidden, not forgotten, just kept. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Inside, something slower began to take shape. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a steady beginning, built on a moment that refused to fade. The afternoon moved slowly, carried by small routines that felt newly important. Elizabeth sat beside the couch, watching Lily sleep between short moments of wakefulness. Each time the baby opened her eyes, they seemed clearer, more present. The faint haze from the fever had faded. Elizabeth followed the instructions carefully, measuring out the medicine with steady hands and checking Lily's temperature with quiet focus. 98.9. The number felt like a quiet victory. She wrote it down on a small piece of paper, marking the time beside it. Not because anyone asked her to, because it gave her control over something that had once felt uncertain. The apartment held a gentle stillness. Sunlight shifted across the floor as the hours passed. The sound of distant traffic filtered through the window, familiar and grounding. Elizabeth stood and stretched slightly, her muscles reminding her of the long night she had carried. She walked to the kitchen and prepared a simple meal. Toast and warm tea. Nothing special, but it felt like enough. She brought the mug back to the couch and sat down again, never letting Lily out of her sight for more than a few seconds. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Another message, this time shorter. A question about whether she was coming in tomorrow. Elizabeth looked at it from across the room, but did not rush to answer. She took a slow sip of her tea instead. The warmth spread through her chest, steady and calm. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like she was chasing something just out of reach. She was simply present. Lily stirred and let out a soft sound. Elizabeth set the mug aside and leaned closer. "I am right here," she whispered. Lily's small hand moved again, more certain now, finding Elizabeth's finger with a gentle grip. The strength in that tiny motion felt like a promise being rebuilt. Elizabeth smiled softly, her eyes reflecting something that had not been there before. Not just relief, not just gratitude, something stronger, something rooted. She glanced toward the small drawer beside the couch, the one that held the business card. For a moment, she considered opening it. Not to call, just to look. But she stopped herself. Not because she did not want to, because she did not need to right now. That realization surprised her. It felt like standing on solid ground after a long stretch of uncertainty. A quiet confidence began to take shape. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. She could take care of this. She had already proven that much. The memory of the rain still lingered in her mind. The fall, the fear, the moment when everything could have gone wrong. And then the moment someone stopped. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. The difference between those two moments defined everything that followed. She adjusted the blanket around Lily once more and leaned back slightly, allowing herself a moment to rest without closing her eyes. Outside, the light shifted again, moving toward the softer tones of late afternoon. Time continued forward, but it no longer felt like something she had to race against. It felt like something she could walk through, one careful step at a time. And for the first time since becoming a mother, Elizabeth felt that she was not just surviving the days ahead. She was beginning to shape them. Evening settled gently over the apartment, bringing with it a quieter kind of light. The golden tones of sunset filtered through the thin curtain, casting long shadows across the floor. Elizabeth sat near the couch, her back resting lightly against the wall, her eyes fixed on Lily. The baby was awake now, her gaze clearer than it had been all day. Small movements filled the space between them. A stretch of tiny fingers. A soft sound that almost resembled a laugh. Elizabeth leaned forward slightly, her expression soft but attentive. "You are feeling better," she whispered, as if the words themselves could protect the moment. Lily responded with a faint coo, her eyes following Elizabeth's face with growing awareness. That simple connection felt stronger than anything that had come before. Elizabeth reached out and gently touched Lily's hand. The warmth was steady. The strength was real. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself to fully accept what her body had already begun to understand. They were past the worst of it. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time without urgency. Elizabeth glanced toward the kitchen, then back to Lily. Her routine began to form again, but this time it carried intention instead of pressure. She warmed a bottle and tested the temperature carefully before feeding Lily in small, patient intervals. Each sip felt like progress. Each pause felt like reassurance. The quiet rhythm of care replaced the chaos of the night before. When Lily finished, she rested against Elizabeth's chest, her breathing slow and even. Elizabeth held her there a moment longer than necessary, not out of fear, but out of choice. The world outside continued its steady pace. Distant voices drifted through the walls. A car passed by below. None of it pulled her away from this moment. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. Elizabeth glanced at it briefly this time and walked over. She read the message, then typed a short reply. She would return to work in 2 days. Not tomorrow. Not immediately. She pressed send without hesitation. That decision felt different. It felt like something she chose, not something she was forced into. She set the phone down and turned back toward the living space. The small drawer beside the couch caught her attention again. This time, she walked over and opened it. The business card rested exactly where she had placed it. Clean, simple, unchanged. Elizabeth picked it up and looked at it for a few seconds. The name no longer felt distant. It felt connected to something real, something that had already proven itself. She did not dial the number. She did not need to. Instead, she placed the card back carefully, but not as before. She left the drawer slightly open. Not hidden, not closed away, just within reach. Lily stirred softly, drawing her attention back. Elizabeth returned to her side and adjusted the blanket once more. The room had grown dimmer now, the last light of the day fading into a calm evening glow. Elizabeth sat beside her daughter and allowed herself to rest without tension. Her thoughts no longer raced ahead. They stayed here, grounded in the present. The memory of the rain remained, but it no longer carried fear. It carried something else now. A reminder that even in the middle of a storm, one moment could change everything. And sometimes, that was enough to begin again. The night returned quietly, but it did not feel the same as before. The darkness outside no longer carried fear. It carried rest. Elizabeth sat beside the couch, her body finally allowing itself to slow down. Lily slept peacefully, her small breaths steady and soft, like a rhythm that no longer needed to be questioned. The apartment held a gentle stillness, not empty, but full in a quiet way. Elizabeth leaned back against the wall, her eyes half open, watching the rise and fall of her daughter's chest. Each breath felt like a promise that had been kept. The events of the past day replayed in her mind, not as chaos, but as a sequence of moments that had led her here. The rain, the fall, the silence that followed, and then the moment someone chose to stop. That moment stayed with her, clearer than anything else. It did not feel like luck. It felt like something intentional, something that reached through everything she had been carrying and shifted it just enough. Elizabeth glanced toward the small drawer, still slightly open. The business card rested inside, unchanged, waiting without expectation. She did not reach for it. Not tonight. Tonight was not about what came next. It was about what had already changed. Lily stirred slightly and let out a soft sound, then settled again, her tiny hand resting near her face. Elizabeth moved closer and adjusted the blanket with gentle care. "You are safe," she whispered, the words steady and certain. This time, they were not just hope. They were truth. She sat back down and allowed herself to breathe fully, without tension, without urgency. Outside, a distant car passed by, its sound fading quickly into the quiet street. Somewhere in the building, a door closed softly. Life continued, but it no longer felt distant or separate. It felt connected, as if she had stepped back into it in a new way. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to sleep, but to feel the stillness around her. The exhaustion from the night before remained, but it no longer weighed her down. It rested beside her, acknowledged and understood. When she opened her eyes again, nothing had changed in the room, yet everything felt different. The same walls, the same small space, but now it held something more than survival. It held possibility. Elizabeth looked at Lily once more, her gaze soft but steady. "We are going to be okay," she said quietly. The words did not echo. They settled, grounding themselves in the space around her. Outside, the sky stretched dark and calm, no longer heavy with rain. And somewhere beyond what she could see, the world continued to move, full of moments that could break or heal, depending on who chose to stop. Elizabeth did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not need to. For the first time, she understood something simple and powerful. He had everything money could buy. But that night, she reminded him what it meant to care. And in return, he reminded her that even in the hardest moments, kindness could still find its way through.